Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everyone for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And you are listening to Studio A. And my special guest this evening is Stewart Swerdlow. And gifted medical intuitive, Stewart Swerdlow is a clairvoyant who has the ability to see auric fields and personal archetypes, as well as read DNA sequences and mind patterns. His great-uncle, Yakov Sverdlov, was the first president of the Soviet Union. His grandfather helped form the Communist Party in the United States in the 1930s. To ensure that his loyalty stayed with the United States government, he was recruited for specific government mind control experiments, which enhanced his natural abilities. He spent years in service to various U.S. and foreign government agencies and special interest groups. His mind and body were used for genetic and mind control experiments, which led to severe illness, broken relationships, and premature Kundalini activation. After several years of deep self-analysis, Stewart merged with higher levels of his multidimensional self, which saved his life. Stewart has authored and co-authored with his wife, Janet, several books and lectures worldwide for a variety of groups, organizations, and large corporations. And his website is expansions.com. His new book is True World History, Humanity Saga, which is available on Amazon.com. And please welcome Stewart to the show this evening. Stewart, how are you this late night?
Fine, thank you, Solaris. That was quite an introduction there.
Well, thank you for joining me and staying awake. I know it's late hours for you over there.
Yes, it is, but you know what? I'm excited to be on your show, and I'm wide awake.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to have you on, and there's so many things that are whirling through my head right now. So, first of all, I want to applaud you and your wife, Janet, for the work you are doing. There are many people out there who have been horrifically affected by various forms of mind control, so I want to thank you all for being there and supporting, those who have gone through that kind of an abuse.
Yes, basically, Solaris, it's a global issue right now. All 7.4 billion people on the earth, in some form or another, are being affected by mind control and programming.
I believe that, totally. And considering your background with your great-uncle, I mean, that's hardcore, and your president, or was the first president of the Soviet Union, of course, and your grandfather who helped form the Communist Party. I mean, were you recruited by choice? I mean, was it something that you were just kind of forced into doing?
Well, I guess it depends what level you look at it. On an oversoul level, I suppose I agreed to do it. On a physical level, I didn't have much of a choice. And my grandfather, who actually was sent here to the United States to start the Communist Party, was first sent to the United Kingdom. And his immigration records show that he actually came to the U.S. from Liverpool. And in Britain, he also helped formulate the Communist Party there before coming here to the United States. And my grandmother was a Soviet spy in World War II. But, of course, in those days, the U.S. and Soviet Union were on the same side against Nazi Germany.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. What a background. That's incredible.
But I want to add one other thing because, when I went to Russia a few times and because of my background, I get a lot of information you don't normally get. Well, it turns out that Yakov's son, Alexei, was the one who started the KGB. And my other great-uncle, Benjamin, who was Yakov's brother and my grandfather's brother, actually started mind control and programming in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. So when I found out all of that, then my life kind of fell into perspective about why I had the experiences that I had.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I mean, how could you avoid it? It seems like like I said, that's incredible. What a legacy in such a strange way. And I'd like to go into some detail insofar as, and if you're comfortable with this or not, but what exactly were the techniques used in mind control? How did they use it on you? And what devices did they use? What type of technology?
Yeah, well, just keep in mind that back in those days, it was a bit different than it is now. But they did have very huge computer systems in the Montyk project where I was from 1970 to 1983. But prior to the 1990s, what they would do is actually take a person physically and put them into what we call a programming session, where there would be trauma-induced psychic driving, where extremes would be introduced to the environment, keep you up for days, then put you for sleep for days, starvation, followed by overfeeding, heat, followed by cold, etc. And all of that was designed to fracture the mind pattern so that the mind wouldn't know what to expect next, and then it would start to split in order to accommodate all of the different input. Mm-hmm. And that was a technique that was devised by the Nazis during World War II. And so they would have, for example, in psychic driving, they would split the front of the face with a divider, so that one side, your left eye, for example, would see images of a flower or a puppy, and then the right eye would see images of people being murdered and raped. One ear would have music that was classical, and the other ear would have music coming in that was acid rock, all at the same time. So the mind would just split in order to accommodate, and that's called fracturing and compartmentalization. Mm-hmm. And it creates this basically a fragmented cube structure within the mind, made up of cubes 13 by 13 by 13, which adds up to 2,197 different compartments or sub-personalities that can be programmed to one degree or another. Mm-hmm. And that's the foundation or basis of programming.
Right.
And, of course, mind control, as we know, what we refer to as modern mind control actually began back in the 1100s in Persia with the Asashim, who were basically given a potion to put them to sleep. They would be woken up in another location where they were told they were dead and had gone to heaven. And in order to get their lives back, they would have to follow the instructions of the leader, who would send them back to Earth so that he would have a second chance. And of course, it was all done by drugs. And then the person would be put back to sleep, put back in their bedroom, woken up, and they would think that the Allah had sent them back to Earth to do his bidding, and his bidding was to assassinate his enemies. Mm-hmm. And so that was the beginning of programming, what we call modern programming. So all that comes together in our time, especially in the 20th century, where they fragmented the personality, put various programs into the various compartments, and then each of those compartments or subalters have triggers, which could be words, numbers, colors, combination, also could be time sensitive. But these triggers then activate the function of that particular programming altar to fulfill its purpose. Right. And what the Illuminati or those in control have in mind is to have a programmed population where nobody deviates from the accepted functions of their programming, no one questions anything, and the culture and society continue on like this because there's no possibility of change. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we are very well into that goal for the Illuminati.
You think so, huh?
I see it every day, and you can see it every day.
Yeah, I do. I was just curious. I try to stay optimistic, but you're right. I mean, especially after where I've been too, because I've been through a lot. But yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about all this information. And so far as the psychotronic driving goes, because nowadays, of course, they use the deployment through satellite where they're psychotronically driving a test subject. And it's really difficult for them to break with that program. What is your recommendation for people who are getting stalked by this technology that they can't seem to block or remove themselves from?
Well, that's why I do what I do. I teach deprogramming techniques, which are very vast and extensive, depending on what you have. And I also teach protection techniques where you keep your energy field in a violet color, and violet being like an amethyst color. And violet blocks the ELF and microwave transmissions, whether it be from a cell tower or satellite transmission or even your telephone or computer. The violet will protect the person and block the energy. And I also teach to use what I call a brown merger symbol at the pineal gland at the center of the head. And people can see that image on my website, expansions.com. And in my books, and the brown merger symbol basically does two things. It acts as an energetic reintegration of the compartmentalization of the mind pattern, so pulls all the pieces back together again. And it also works to block any further programming input. So we have developed templates that you can keep on your pillow, you can wear, you can visualize it at your pineal gland 24/7. It's because it's a 24/7 war out there energetically. And we need to keep this brown merger and the violet around us at all times to block the programming transmissions.
That's excellent. Yeah, I recommend everybody check out your website for sure, and also anybody who's targeted, check out your website as well. That's incredible information on there. I was looking at it. And also, considering the Montauk Project, and you said you were there from 1970 to 1983, is that correct?
Yes, 13 years.
Wow, that's 13 years of hell, I'm sure. I mean, obviously this was not something that was pleasant. Is that correct?
No, it was not pleasant at all.
Right. And so far as, what was their objective with Montauk? I mean, what were they really trying to establish over there?
Well, during the time I was there, we were indoctrinated quite extensively and frequently, I guess, to encourage us to continue on without argumentation, I suppose. But we were told that humanity as a species was incapable of taking care of itself, and that if human beings were left on their own, they would fight with each other, and there'd be chaos on the world, and nothing would progress. So Montauk was designed to, according to them, to help society function properly through programming and mind control so that people would have an orderly society. However, that's not the real reason. The real reason was when you are a group of people that number perhaps in the thousands or tens of thousands even, and you are trying to control a population of billions, weapons and armies are not enough because you could be easily overwhelmed. So mind control and programming then makes sense so that you make the population believe that what's imposed on them is what they actually want. And so then you have a very neat little package wrapped up of little robots that run around doing what they're told and not questioning anything and thinking it's good for them.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like it stopped then. And insofar as the Montauk chair goes, now you sat in that chair, is that correct?
I have sat in that chair, but I wasn't the main focus of that chair.
Okay.
I was actually used as a booster to the main psychic who was used, which I'm sure your listeners know from reading the series on the Montauk Project, that there was quite a cadre of people there. And the Montauk chair was alien technology, came from Sirius A, and was adapted for this project. And what it did basically, it kind of looked like a dentist chair, only it had these little winglet things on the side of the head that came up and attached to the temple area. And whatever the person would think would then be downloaded into a computer and stored. It could be amplified. It could be added to other stored information and then beamed up to satellites, which then transmitted to either a local group, a specific target, or even an entire region. And now, of course, we have the planet completely surrounded by satellites so that there's nowhere on the Earth, whether it's civilization or not, that cannot be bombarded with this programming ELF waves because it's completely covered. The whole planet is covered.
Certainly is. Yeah, a lot of space junk out there, without a doubt. And I thought Preston Nichols was working on that chair. Is he not one of the developers, or am I off on that?
He was more of in the technical end of it.
Okay.
But he didn't develop the chair. He may have adapted it to the use, but the technology was not from the Earth.
I see. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like it was actually integrated or downloaded into what you call the computers. Now, is that also artificial intelligence oriented?
In those days it wasn't, but now it is.
Right. Okay.
There's been a lot of progress technologically since then.
There certainly has. And insofar as the chair goes, are they still using it?
Not in that way.
Okay.
Because as you mentioned earlier, everything is done now with the satellites and the cell towers. So you could just be sitting, having lunch and you're being mind controlled and programmed. You don't even know it.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Without a doubt. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's kind of haunting, I'm sure, on so many different levels. But what are they actually looking for when they select a candidate for that sort of thing? And when they recruit people, what are they really looking for?
Well, they're looking for genetics, they're looking for mind pattern, they're looking for soul personality history. Basically, they're looking for the person who could be, like a treasure chest of mind control and programming for them that they can use in every possible way. Now, most of the population is not like that. Most of the population doesn't have the mind pattern or genetics to accept all of the programming. So what we have generally out there is what I call, programming for the masses, which is approximately, at this point, about 85% of the population has general programming. Mm-hmm. And that is, believe what CNN tells you, do what the Weather Channel tells you to do, what the president says is the truth. Just believe everything you're told. Don't question. Go along with your life, and and repeat things over and over every day. Mm-hmm. But then there's about 15% of the population at this point who are specifically programmed, and of course, 15% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you times that by 7.4 billion, then it's quite a bit of people. Mm-hmm. And these people have a lot of programming packed into their mind patterns because they're able to accept it. And it can be quite a range of different functions and function groups and categories that I talk about in some of my books. Mm-hmm. Anyone who is interested in the various types should read 13 Cubed and True Reality of Sexuality, where I go into the different types of the programming and how to undo them. Mm-hmm. But certainly everyone out there, 100%, needs to do some sort of deprogramming and protection on their energy field on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Totally agree with you. The one thing I can relate to, when I was tagged with the communication system, I did a lot of spiritual protection, and they just opened up, they just ripped up, mm-hmm. My electromagnetic field right up, open, basically. So literally, it wasn't about being protected psychically, it was just about them deploying the technology. So that's something I guess I can talk to you about later on. But it was very interesting. I know they do some hardcore deployment insofar as what they're doing with this technology these days. And my question to you was, I know you said it accentuated your psychic ability. I've heard you mention that before in the past. I was wondering how that happened. How did it accentuate your psychic ability?
Yeah, well, basically, especially in those days when the technology wasn't like what it is now, mm-hmm. what happened was the electromagnetic bombardment, especially along the spinal column, induced a premature Kundalini activation. So when that happens, of course, Kundalini means that all of your chakras are open simultaneously in sequence, and then that kind of explodes at the pineal and crown chakra, mm-hmm. so that you suddenly open up and become aware of infinite or multiple realities simultaneously, and then not able to focus in any one of them because it's kind of like a cycling of alternate realities and parallel universes going through the mind. Mm-hmm. And so they do that on purpose so that they can create an interdimensional person who could see into other realities without a device, and then they can be used for espionage, to mind control other people, psychic attacks, whatever functions that they wish to create in the person. Mm-hmm. And so that was, in those days, those were the main reasons for why they opened up psychically like this. Of course, a side effect could be both mental and physical illnesses and even death. Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of the people at the Montauk Project aren't here anymore.
Right.
I was told that less than 1% survived, and of that less than 1%, very few were able to function in society, and most had memory issues. Now, I was a bit of an anomaly because I remembered everything they did, and no matter what they tried to do, it couldn't wipe the memory from me. Yes, some of it was suppressed for a bit, but the memory was still there. Mm-hmm. So I became an anomaly and a bigger target.
Right.
Because then they would use me as a guinea pig to see, okay, well, now let's see if we can change this on the other person, on another person, so it doesn't come out like that. And that's what they did at Montauk in the beginning. It was a big testing sequences, because they would say, okay, with a person with this genetics, if we put these groups of programming in, what will be the results? And if we take this genetics and put this group in, what will happen? So it was like guinea pigs to see what would happen, kind of developing a formula for various genetic mix and groups. And then at the end, by the end of the 13 years, they had already a fantastic science of knowing, okay, this person with this genetics, we could do X, Y, and Z, and this one we could do this. And it was a science. And there was, perfection in the mind control.
Wow.
And that's what we have now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. My wheels are spinning super fast, so forgive me if I start mixing up words.
That's okay. I hope I can get my words out.
No, it's fine because I'm like in hyperdrive right now. So, what's interesting about this whole thing with the psychotronic technology and everything else, what do you think got you through it? I mean, as far as the way you got out of it, what kept you going and stabilized? Because it sounds like you're mentally very, very strong.
Well, there are people who disagree with you, that's all.
Really?
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, I'm called all kinds of names, but that's to be expected in this field of work. But look, there were times when I was quite suicidal. And I said, I had enough. I need to get out of this. And it was quite brutal, as you know. But what got me through? That's a very, very good question. Because no matter what they do to a person, they cannot remove the God mind within you. Each one of us, and I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person, and I believe that there is a God mind and it controls and creates everything. And so that's the aspect of the mind they can't control. And that's what they try to do, to the point of overloading people to the point of death. But for me, with my genetics, my ancestry, my mind pattern, I was able to survive knowing that this was not a permanent condition and that I would get to another end of it, and that the God mind within me was stronger than anything that they could do to me. And I have to think about that and remind myself of that even now on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We're constantly attacked here, whether it's energetically, psychically, physically, you name it, we are attacked. It's a war on a daily basis.
I agree.
And so you just never know what to expect, and so you have to expect everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and do you have implants at all?
Oh, yes, of course. In fact, they've been X-rayed. I don't know if you've read any of my books, but
I have actually.
In Blue Blood, True Blood, I talk about this person, Rosie 2, who basically had me kidnapped, and I was taken away. It was in Alaska, South America, Europe. And when I finally escaped from that, and I went to a doctor because I was in very, very bad shape, and they found like 24 needle marks in my back, which there was no way I could have done that to myself. So someone stuck those needles in my back. I don't know what was in them, but they were heavy metals. And then they took X-rays. And so when I went for my appointment to review my X-rays, it was kind of like a scene in the movie where, the doctor's all dressed in white and he has a little hat on and he takes the X-ray and he puts it up on the screen and flips the light on behind it. And he says, "So, when did you have your abdominal surgery?" I said, "I never had abdominal surgery. I don't have a scar or anything." And he looked at me, he says, "Come on." He said, "When did you have your surgery? You have a metallic artifact in your abdomen." And I said, "I never had surgery." And he got very, very furious at me, and he pulled the X-ray down, and he looked at me, and he said, "So what, were you abducted by aliens?" And I'm like, well.
That's
But
nice.
I didn't say anything. But you know what, Solaris? I asked for those X-rays, and they refused to give them to me. And technically, they're my property,
Right.
and it was refused.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then I also had X-rays done by a chiropractor. There are implants they saw in my hip, in my leg, in other parts of my body. So yes, I have physical evidence of the implants.
Right. And do you get transmissions at all still, or no?
Well, we all get transmissions.
I mean, anything that's manufactured by them through the array system?
No,
Okay.
because, I've done so much work on myself. I believe I've mostly neutralized these implants. You really can't take them out if they're in the torso because you can hemorrhage to death.
Mm-hmm.
So I constantly flush with violet, which neutralizes them.
Mm-hmm.
If you use sea salt, it also neutralizes them. And actually, the more organically you eat, the more they're weakened because they really thrive on all the artificial junk in the foods and medications that people take.
Mm-hmm. That would explain why they have so much genetically modified materials in foods.
Exactly correct. It's to enhance all the implants and the mind control.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Yeah, they're full speed ahead, it seems to me, insofar as deploying this type of mass control.
Absolutely. The goal is within another year to have the entire planet under their jurisdiction 100%. And that's why we are seeing all of these so-called, uprisings and revolutions around the world now, which are all artificially created. That's not coming from the people, actually.
Mm-hmm.
These are from intelligence services that create these situations.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that one also. And what about the time traveling factor? I mean, is there time traveling or is there something happening with a bleed-through effect that is actually altering the timeline that we exist on?
Well, again, a very good question and one that I hear often.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that in Montauk Project, we learn that you cannot change the past and you cannot alter the current timeline. And I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. Well, first let me explain how time travel takes place, because it can happen. Every point in time and space has a unique frequency or bandwidth that is unique to that particular point in time and space. So if you have an object and you vibrate that object to a specific frequency, there will be an instantaneous connection to that other point in time and space because it can only exist in one point in time and space. Mm-hmm. So whatever object or person you vibrate to that particular frequency, it will go to that point. So that's how vehicles travel in deep space. That is how time travel takes place. It's instantaneously, no time passage at all. Mm-hmm. Now, we learned in Montauk Project that there are infinite timelines. You can't even conceive of all of them, parallel universes, some physical, some non-physical. And it's kind of like if you visualize a big telephone line, trunk line with all the wires wrapped around each other inside of it. That's kind of what it's like. And each one of those wires is a particular timeline. And they learned that every possible situation takes place somewhere in existence. So therefore, it's not possible to alter a timeline or change an event because it's already been changed somewhere. Mm-hmm. So basically what happens then, you would go to an alternate timeline where that event took place. So for example, they tried to go back in time and kill Hitler. That was, if you remember, when in the Reichstag where the bomb exploded near him, but it didn't kill him. That was a Montauk Project experiment to do that, and of course it didn't work. And that's because there's another alternate reality where that did happen and it did work. So it didn't have to be done in this reality. And on and on and on. And they found out there were realities when Germany won the war and we all spoke German. And there were realities when Atlantis never stopped functioning. And there were realities where the earth never had civilization at all. Mm-hmm. And everything you can think of existed. So there was nothing to change or alter. So it's a question of where we focus and what conditions we wish to accept in our timeline, and that's the timeline that we will be part of. It's a bandwidth of energy. Think of it kind of like a radio, where you have this dial on this station, and you turn it just ever so slightly, and you're in another station that's completely different. Mm-hmm. Turn it again, and you're in another station completely different. And that's what it's like to go into physical alternate realities and into parallel universes.
That's like my brain.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very, very well said. And I'm thinking about all this type of technology that they've been deploying over the years, and I know it's become super advanced, obviously. But did SDI research have anything to do with the deployment of the satellites insofar as the mind control and psychotronic weapons go?
It's all related. That was part of what they plan to do, I think, either this year or next year, which is the staged alien invasion. Which was actually created by the Nazis in World War II when Werner von Braun was brought to this country in Project Paperclip after the war. He was the one that brought the staged alien invasion. He said that was Hitler's last card to play to frighten the world into a unified government. And so that's all part of what's happening. And so in order to get the staged alien invasion successful, you have to program people with it so that they accept it, knowing that it's coming. And that's why we see on the news now on almost a daily basis some stories about asteroids or meteors or life in space or twin Earths or something out there that years ago would have been ridiculed and made fun of and now is accepted as a definite possibility. And so that's a precursor to what is coming as a staged alien invasion.
Right. That makes perfect sense to me. I see that happening across the globe. And is there any way to disrupt the array system? I mean, is there any way to alter this, or do you feel like it's just meant to be?
Are you talking about the HARP system?
Yeah, I'm talking about the combination of systems that they're using through satellites to deploy a scrambling signature. It seems to me like there is a frequency fence of some kind, and especially after I was inducted, I could tell that they're using some kind of a tactical hardware where they're tagging people, obviously, through the system. So I'm wondering if there's a way to technologically disrupt that array system. I know you mentioned visualization and psychic shielding.
Well, yes, to answer your question, yes, there is a way, but it's very dangerous to do that because they will know that you're doing it. They can monitor what equipment you have, and they will target it, and whoever has that equipment will be eradicated. So I don't recommend doing it in that way.
Okay.
Because that's why when I see all these people write into me and they say, oh, on the internet they're selling this device and that device that, it's a cloud buster, it's an Oregon, whatever. You know what? If it's on the internet for sale, then it's not real because they would never allow that to be sold. Some people wrote in, oh, there's a time machine. You could buy a time machine on the internet. It's like, I don't think so. If that was true, that whoever's selling it wouldn't be around anymore. So no. But to answer your question, yes, there is a way technologically, but if you try that, you might as well just put a flag outside, say, "Here I am, come and get me."
I agree. Well, I had to ask.
Yeah, I know.
I'm always looking for solutions. And so far as these programs go, now I know they do the pattern recognition and they do numbers, codes, and can you go through the some of the things that you're aware of insofar as colors? What do the colors signify? What do the numbers signify? Things like that.
Oh boy, so we'll be on the air for 2 weeks.
Oh no!
I mean, there's amazing combinations of numbers that are possible. Remember, there's over 2,000 compartments and altars and different ones for each people. But I want people to understand that the color codes that are used by the programmers are different than the color codes of your chakra system or hyperspace energy, that colors have a natural innate function and meaning, which are then twisted, if you will, or inverted by the mind control to mean other things. For example, let's use the color ice blue. Ice blue is the color of the throat chakra between the nose and the collarbone, specifically, and its natural function is for communication. It reduces blood pressure. It can stop pain. It helps you to find verbalization in the mind. But the Illuminati take the ice blue, and if you have an ice blue code in your programming, it means stand still, do not move, cease functioning. You understand?
Yeah.
Pale red, for example, the color red in the root chakra, base chakra, top applies to pubic bone. This is an energy to help with the temperature of the body, to help with recreation, to help with energizing for exercise, etc. naturally. The Illuminati use that for sexual monarch programming, so that you can become a sexual ritual slave, or become involved in sexual activities for programming and attack purposes. So these are some of the things. And I'll give you a numerical example. The number 11 is used in hyperspace as a new beginning frequency. If you have that number come up, it means life will start over again, new home, new job, new relationships, etc. In programming, it means go to the next phase of programming. So you see, they take the natural functions, the natural state of things, and then they twist it to their own devices.
Right.
So people must be aware of such things.
Oh, absolutely. And they do that through in between the spaces of being under a target being under hypnosis, right?
Well, that is why when people say, oh, I'm going to go for hypnotic regression, I say, do not do that. Because hypnosis can trigger programs or alters within the back altar of the matrix that will come forward that are not supposed to, or it can trigger a false memory and you think it's a real one. I don't believe in hypnosis because, first of all, you don't know who the therapist is or what they could be doing. And second of all, it could be triggering you.
Absolutely.
So that's why I teach people exercises that they do for themselves, and they control the frequency and the speed of the exercise for themselves. And then you don't need anyone else.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I've never gone to hypnosis. As a matter of fact, I'm real leery of that, so I'm glad you confirmed that with me also. Yeah. That's very
and just
good.
when people go and say, oh, I found out I was a princess in ancient Egypt. Well, maybe that's a programming altar within you that's going to come forward now, you know? It's like everyone is Napoleon or they're a temple priest or everyone has an American Indian guide. For goodness sake, there weren't that many American Indians for them to have a guide. It's like there's a billion American Indian guides and there are only like, a million Indians that existed. So it's like, come on, people.
I agree. I totally agree with you on that one. And insofar as you talked about the deprogramming, and obviously that's in your book also, I take it you have, in your new book, did you put the deprogramming in there as well or no?
No, the new book, True World History, is actually the culmination of my years and years and years of travel and research that I put together in this book to give a global Earth history, the real one, not what's taught in school. And I'll tell you what, after that book was just published, I realized I have so much more information that I could have put in there, which I'm going to have to get volume 2 soon.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow, is it just unraveling data?
Well, the more you study and the more you travel and you find out the real information, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And, it gets very complicated sometimes. Movements of people, ancestries, the real, genetic origins of certain groups, the mixes, especially the mixes. So yes, there's a lot to find out, and that's just this planet. In my Blue Blood, True Blood book, I talk about galactic history, which basically leads up to the point of colonization of this planet. So anyone who's interested in the whole thing, start, beginning to end, you should start with the Blue Blood and then get the True World History.
I agree. Yeah. And insofar as your deprogramming goes, I think that's really critical that people deprogram from this or understand that they're being manipulated. And a lot of the people, like you've mentioned before, don't realize they're being manipulated. It's almost subconscious. So for those people who want to be deprogrammed, now you do sessions. You and your wife also do sessions. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do consultations, but email, telephone, in person, whatever is necessary for that person.
Okay.
But I do recommend that they read the information in Hyperspace Helper, Healer's Handbook, Blue Blood, True Blood, like I mentioned, 13 Cube, True Reality, Sexuality, all the deprogramming information, and then that we on our website we have videos. I think on YouTube there's over 200 videos of information on this. So it's a lot of information to study and learn.
Oh, absolutely.
And they need to go through, and then we're here to help wherever necessary.
Yeah, and you also do workshops, right?
Yes. In fact, next month we'll be in New York City at the Meta Center to do workshops and consultations.
Excellent. So that involves deprogramming as well at the workshops?
Well, we don't do the deprogramming at the workshops. We teach. It depends on the subject matter. Sometimes we just do basic information on hyperspace. Sometimes we do oversoul work. Sometimes we do DNA work. Sometimes just the chakra system or alternative healing. And then other times we do deprogramming work. So it depends on what the audience or the sponsor was looking for.
Excellent. And I know a lot of the times with this type of psychic driving, and you've talked about the shattering, does the astral body get shattered through the psychic driving?
Well, that's a very good question. And it's not that the astral or energetic body is shattered, but it becomes, how shall I say, the colors turn to a different shade that they should be. Unfortunately, when that happens, and let's say a person's been taking a lot of medication, under a lot of medical care, stress, etc., when the person passes on, the Illuminati have a device that can actually capture the soul personality in a containment field. When the mind pattern is weakened, it weakens the electromagnetic energies of the astral body, the etheric body, and it's almost like being vacuumed up into a container, and then it can be used to be imposed in an artificial body or another body or like that. So that is why we must get ourselves in order before we pass on.
Oh, absolutely. And so does that get transferred into the artificial intelligence also?
Yes. They can create a cloned body, which is kind of like a cyborg. It's both biological as well as technological. And then they can impose or attach the mind pattern of the soul personality to that body and artificially control it through implants in the brain or even an artificial brain. And so, yes, then you have a cyborg, which is alive and is still a person, and yet it's artificial.
Right. And can that be reversed onto a test subject also, so they could actually transfer it from the source of the artificial intelligence into a body, like a physical body?
Oh, absolutely. But here's what happens. Here's what happens when in that case. The body will not sustain for a very long period of time. Because if we look at natural creation, when a person is born, it's the mind pattern and the soul personality that create the genetics. The mind pattern is electromagnetic in nature, and as it descends into physical reality, it attracts the free molecular structures that exist in the physical plane. Those physical or molecular structures form into protein bases, which become the foundation of your DNA and the blueprint of your body. And that's the flow chart. So in effect, the mind pattern and the soul personality create the genetics and the body like tailor-made hand in a glove. So when another artificial intelligence or even another personality is put into that body, it's not a match. And so it cannot be sustained for a long period of time, and the body will eventually weaken and die.
That makes sense.
So, when people talk about, they're a walk-in, well, then you'd be dead. There's a lot of New Age mis- and disinformation that people unfortunately accept. But if they look at literally the science behind it, they'd realize it's not possible to be like that.
And it seems like since we are electrical beings, it's easy to hijack us on an electrical level with this technology. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's like a carjacking. You know? And what happens to carjacked cars? They crash eventually.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've seen so much destruction with this type of technology being deployed. It's amazing. And what's interesting to me is that there is no accountability, and I'd like to know why these people are allowed to get away with this agenda. It just seems like so many people have suffered. I mean, I know that there are forced suicides where they're forced into hearing so much dialogue they can't take it, and they die, the target. So why isn't there accountability, would you say?
Well, I've been asked that question also many times, and I'm going to tell you there is accountability. It's just you may not be able to see it at this point. It may not be in your time frame. But ultimately, whatever anyone does for any reason, they have to be accountable when they pass on. And that is why the Illuminati are so involved in creating immortality because then they don't have to deal with the passing on. But ultimately, look, no being lives forever except the God mind. And so ultimately they will be judged and they will, have to make retribution for what they've done. Mm-hmm. On the other side of that, and here's where people get a little flustered when I say this, the mind pattern attracts the experience. Mm-hmm. So thoughts are like film, the brain is the projector, and physical reality is the screen. So whatever movie is playing in your life, it's because of the film you're running in the mind and the projector. Mm-hmm. So you have to change the mind pattern in order to change the projection. So yes, even though there's all this torture and all this mind control and programming, it's not that we are innocent victims, but we are willing participants on some level. Mm-hmm. So we each ourselves have to take responsibility that because of our thinking pattern, we have accepted this and have allowed this into our lives. So if that is so, then we can undo that and change that too, no matter what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that too. And you can alter the program, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people who are strong in their minds can do that. I'm not sure about those who are not. I'm pretty darn stubborn, so I know I can, but I know a lot of people have a hard time.
Well, I'm a Russian Viking, so you know that...
That's awesome.
I'm very stubborn. But the thing is, Solaris, people get upset when I say this because, quite honestly, a lot of them like being a victim and not taking responsibility. Oh, yes, I'm poor and I have this problem because I'm programmed. I can't do anything about it. Well, yes, you can. Mm-hmm. You actually allowed this to happen. And here's what I also say. It's not just an individual, but it's collectively as the species. Humanity or human beings as a species have a collective victimization mind pattern. Mm-hmm. And so collectively they attract tyrants and oppressors. So if humanity learns to remove and release the victimization mentality, then the Illuminati and the mind control and the programming will not be able to exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
It's really, that's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Very true and well said. Definitely. Yeah. The victim mentality doesn't work without a doubt.
No, and we all have it. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like an agreement of some kind. It makes me wonder. Yeah. Oh gosh, I have so many questions I want to ask you. We are going to go for a break in a few minutes here, but I do want to ask: has your wife Janet ever been subjected to mind control?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, she has been.
Absolutely. Okay. Hers was a bit different than mine, but it's like having either a stroke or a heart attack. The result's the same.
Right. I'm glad you guys have each other, and you also apparently moved through all these programs together, right?
Well, we had a little bit of a life before we met each other. Mm-hmm. And so, we were married to other people and etc. Yes, we had our different pathways that finally met at a certain point. And from that point on, we have combined forces, if you will, and learned from each other. Mm-hmm. And brought that to the public. So she has quite an interesting background herself, being a Waldensian. Most people don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. But the Waldensians were descendants of the apostles and the Magdalene frequency lineage, and actually then blended with the Moors. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a fascinating group.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And plus she has Cherokee in her.
Nice. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Oh, I bet you guys have a lovely, energetic together. That's great. Yeah, I really encourage everybody to check out your website, without a doubt. And looking through all of this, the intent behind the technology is to control consciousness, would you say? I mean, that's really the plan?
Basically, to control reality.
Which consciousness would control reality, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's really the agenda behind the scenes. So I guess we can change the scenery through higher consciousness. Now, would that be a group collective linking up, or would that just be singular consciousness?
It's both. We have to work on ourselves to connect to the God mind within. And Janet and I, you do oversoul work, and the oversoul is the energetic intermediary between individual personality and the God mind, but it's still all one consciousness anyway. Right. And so to work with that and connect to that.
Excellent. All right, everybody, we're heading for a break. We'll be right back. Ravenstar's Witching Hour with Stewart Swerdlow. Stay tuned.